Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Period Sis, brought to you by none other than the official box owner. I'm your girl, Mandy B, your host, and I'm super excited about this episode today because we're talking about birth control today. You saw it in the title. You know what it is. I think we all have some level of experience with some sort of birth control or at least had the conversation with it. So I'm super excited today to be joined with a healthcare professional to talk about all of the pros and cons amongst all of the variety and options of birth control that we have. Once again, it's another tale of womanhood for women by women. And today we are joined by Esme, who has a lot and tons of knowledge in this birth control space. So hello, Esme. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, Mandy. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you. A lot of you may have already joined us in this conversation if you were an early on Patreon member of the official box owner and the box owner hive that we had going on at one point. But I definitely wanted to bring this conversation to the forefront for all of the listeners over here at Period Sis. I think that this is important, and one of the reasons, I'm not sure how we even met. Maybe
Twitter.
I made a post about it. Was it Twitter? So there were all of these, when I first met my partner, there was immediately, because we very quickly, I feel like fell in love and was like, okay, no barriers needed. We're having unprotected sex. And there was an early on conversation regarding pregnancy and what our options were. And I let him know upfront I did not want a baby. However, with all of the things that I was doing with building all of my own businesses, it was also very important for me to feel like I was in control of my emotions and feelings. And that's what that's what I assume often comes with birth control, is that as a woman, you no longer are in control of yourself. So let's start there. I guess, where did you get into really doing your research and being a part of where you really started researching birth control methods?
Sure, yeah. So first, also, I just want to make it clear I'm not a licensed healthcare, like I'm not a clinician, I'm not a physician. So just want to make that clear for the listeners that nothing I say replaces talking with a licensed clinician or physician. So how I got into this was I was actually raised by a single father, and I feel that a lot of my learning and development around reproductive health and sexuality and my body was really kind of, limited in that way because not having like a female figure in my life. And then also, obviously, like in school, you don't learn this kind of stuff in a way that's really helpful or progressive or empowering, right? So as soon as I left high school and got into university, I kind of just began this exploration on my own, became really interested in it. A couple of the courses that I took in college kind of focused on this kind of stuff. I took like a female reproductive biology class. I took some other stuff around like evolutionary biology and reproduction. And so that's kind of how I got into it.
Awesome. So I really want to, I guess, let's start with breaking down the options that many women have. And we have a list because, again, you and your organization helped me out with how we were going to break down this conversation. Because, again, even when I started my research, I'll be honest, I was researching on Twitter, for one. I was asking women about their different experiences with different options. And I was overwhelmed personally with how many options there were, and also just the range of pros and cons with each of them. So I guess let's start off with the types of birth control. And I guess we'll separate them, guys. There are three different, I guess, categories. There's a hormonal type of birth control, there's non-hormonal, and then there's the FAM method. So we're going to start with the ones that most of us are probably more so familiar with than anything. And so those are the hormonal options of birth control. Can you get into maybe starting to name those, and then we can get into which ones you feel like are the best options, which ones have maybe more side effects than others? Where do you want to start with the hormonal options?
Sure, yeah. And so before I even get into that, I'm going to say something that I used to say all the time when I used to work at a reproductive health clinic, which is
Okay.
the best birth control method is the one that you're going to actually use.
Okay.
So, yeah. So, I mean,
I
and
like that.
that includes side effects too, because like if you're hating how it makes you feel and you stop taking it, like you're not using it, right?
Right.
So, but in terms of hormonal methods, how we like to break them down usually is combined methods and non-combined methods, or
Okay.
progestin only methods. So for combined methods, we have our pill patch ring, and then for progestin only methods, we have our the progestin only pill, which is sometimes called the mini pill. We have the implant. We have the injection, the depot shot, and then we have the Mirena IUD.
Okay, and I'm super familiar with all of them. I actually of them all, I have okay, don't judge me either. I've only popped
No
the
judging here.
pills. I've only popped the pills to throw off my period when I really wanted to have sex, maybe for a trip. I did take the depot, the shot, which I personally did not enjoy my experience with. I really actually only got the shot twice. Um, and only having it twice, I still did not have a period for the entire year. And then I ended up really, my body was just, I honestly thought I was pregnant by around December. So I got it in January. I got the shot again in March, didn't get it again. And then by December, I feel like my body was maybe the medicine was leaving, and I was with a partner, and I was like, uh-oh, I think I'm pregnant. Like, that's how just out of whack my body was. And what's crazy is I literally bled for maybe a month and a half.
In
At,
December?
right, like the top of January, end of December is when, okay, my period came. It started off as spotting, and then it was just a constant either heavy flow, then just brown, then just spotting, then another heavy. And it was super inconsistent. Also, during the time of Depot, I felt like my skin was incontrollable. And I mean, I've always battled with my weight, so I don't want to add weight to that as well. But I do feel like there was just a lot of things that were uncontrollable. Now, those are normally cons. Do you have any, why are those normal side effects, I would say, for these type of birth control options?
Sure, yeah. So before I even get into that, the one thing about well, okay, so first, that kind of stuff is very common for a progestin only method in general.
Okay.
Now Depo is very particular in the sense that the type of progestin that is used in the Depo shot is very unlike the one that is naturally produced in our body. So
Ah.
if you get on something like the mini pill, this is my understanding at least. If you get on something like the Mirena, the implant, or the mini pill, the form of progestin that those use is a little bit more similar to the one that's naturally produced in the body, whereas the one for Depo is very different.
Okay.
And so I think that that might play a part of why people have really different experiences on depots. Some people have
Yes.
really great experiences. I mean, when I was working at a reproductive health clinic, we had patients that were on depot for years and years. Girl, they loved it. They came in
Oh
every
wow.
3 months. They love it. Oh yeah, because they don't have to administer it, regularly. They come in every 3 months and they just love it. They don't mind how it makes them feel, and it's effective. So again, when it comes to the question of birth control, and I'll always say this, and this is probably why I'm a good person for this, because I'm very neutral. Like, there's pros and cons, and everybody's so different, right? And different
Right.
things matter to different people. But I will say that what you experience is a very common thing that happens. It doesn't happen to everyone, but especially, for any progestin only method, it's very common that you end up having unpredictable bleeding, and then eventually no period at all. Not everyone's like that. Some people have the unpredictable bleeding for a long time on Depo, on the implant, Mirena, whatever. But for a lot of people, they just end up stopping bleeding entirely. It's very common.
Right. Oh no, go ahead. Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, that was definitely my experience. I guess
And some people
just
like
getting
that.
off of it. Yeah, I mean, I love not bleeding because I am one of those that if there's even a spot, I'm not really engaging in any sort of intercourse. I
I
don't like
remember.
a mess. Yeah, I
I
don't like a
remember.
mess. I don't like a mess in that way. So Absolutely not. I guess so. The other option is the non-hormonal, and the one that's in there that is similar to one of the hormonal is there's Mirena, which is hormonal, which is an IUD. As far as non-hormonal, you have the copper IUD. What exactly is the difference? And I'll be honest in saying that was honestly at one point the option I really wanted to take, because that's one that you can leave in for years at a time and you can get it removed. However, my fear is that is also the one that oftentimes men claim they can feel. And yeah, so I wanted to have a conversation regarding the differences now before we get into fully non-hormonal. What do you see outside of the hormones is the difference between the Mirena and the copper IUD?
Sure. And then also, I don't think I even answered your question about like the pros of say Depo, but and
Oh, there we go.
this applies to Mirena too because Mirena is also a progestin only method.
Yes.
They're highly effective. Again, some people don't want to bleed, some people don't mind the unpredictable bleeding. The other thing is I believe that some of the things that prohibit women from getting on combined methods, so like being over 30, not prohibit, but are risk factors,
Right.
smoking, being over 35, those don't apply to progestin only methods. So
Ah.
they're a highly effective method. The Mirena, the implant, and the Depo, and the mini pill if taken, correctly. So yeah, those are some of the pros. When it comes to the differences between the IUDs, so Mirena is a progestin only, Paragard is non-hormonal, and then there's also another third IUD. I think it's called Skyla. I actually am not
Yes,
100% sure
I've
if it's
I've heard
combined or
of it.
not.
Okay.
Yeah, but I would say that, in general, the pros of the IUD, of course, there's just you put it in, you never have to think about it again.
Right.
With the Paragard, you're going through your natural cycle, you are ovulating, you are having that experience of being like a fertile cycling person. And so, if you want that experience, and you don't want any hormonal changes, then that might be a good option for you. It's highly effective. It can also be used as emergency contraception, the Paragard.
Ah.
The biggest downside to the Paragard is it can cause heavier bleeding and a little bit crampier periods. So with the Mirena is highly effective.
Yes. My
However,
sister had that.
sure, yeah, a lot of people love the Mirena, but what can happen with the Mirena is the same exact thing that you described with the Depo. Maybe you have this unpredictable bleeding for however long, maybe it's a lot, maybe it's a little, and then eventually maybe you have no period at all, or maybe that doesn't happen. It's just kind of no way to really know. So those would be, I think, the main differences between them.
I also then really quickly wanted to ask, is there any way for maybe anyone considering birth control? Are there any pre-existing conditions with women that would maybe be able to where someone could predict what their side effects would be with birth control? Or is it really like you have to try it to see type of thing?
You pretty much have to
Oh,
try to. I know, girl.
trial and error on our whole fucking bodies and livelihoods.
I
Okay.
know.
I mean, because I have friends that blame birth control for the ending of their relationships, because it just the arguments or them just feeling completely emotional and not being able to control that. I have friends that literally now have PTSD from birth control because they blame their breakup on it. I guess getting back to the IUD and the non-hormonal options, what are those and what do they look like? Outside, I know we mentioned the copper IUD, but what other non-hormonal options are there?
So, in non-hormonal options, you have your barrier methods. So that's a condom. You have also internal condom. There's the cervical cap, the diaphragm. Those are not really commonly used anymore, but it's important that people know that there's still options out there, right?
Do you have to get them
Yeah.
on Amazon now? Where do you get diaphragm? Like, I they're definitely not in my local pharmacy. So
No, you have to
where
get
do
fitted
you?
for them. So you
Oh,
have to go to a healthcare provider. You have to get fitted for them. Yeah.
oh, they're like the N90 whatever masks that you should really actually be fit for, even with COVID. Like my mom works in healthcare, they actually get fitted for those.
Well, that makes sense.
Um, so, oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, you
I
get
think
fitted for them.
men should get fitted for their condoms as well. So then
Say
maybe
that shit.
maybe they wouldn't fall out inside of us and everything else.
Girl.
Okay, so for diaphragms, you would have to go to your healthcare provider. Of course, we're all familiar with regular male condoms. And I guess can we talk about what experience do you have in having conversations with women who got the copper IUD, which is non-hormonal, which is amazing, but with that being something that males can actually feel sometimes during penetration.
I mean, listen, I I don't know how much I've heard that.
Okay.
I also, I'm not gonna lie, when I hear like people being like, "Oh yeah, my boyfriend complained that he could feel my ring or my I'm like, really? Like, is it really that so bad? I mean, here's the thing.
Okay.
If the IUD is not placed where it's supposed, because okay, so we have the uterus. If the IUD is completely placed properly, the very bottom of it should not be peeking out of the cervix at all.
Right.
So what I mean, it would have, I don't know, like it would have to be falling out a little bit for the partner to be able to feel it. I'm not sure how this works from a more anatomical perspective. You know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. I don't remember patients, like I don't remember when I was working in a reproductive health clinic setting, like people complaining about that too much, but it's also been years since I was in that position.
Okay.
So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that.
Okay. And so I really want to, this last method is to me laughable, and I don't want to make it laughable, but uh, I just am not sure how accurate it is. I do want to say before getting in, we're going to talk about the FAM method now, which upon research is 76 to 88% effective, which I think, okay, that's like a C to a B plus. I would take that as a grading class. With the FAM method, could you explain what that means and what those options look like for women?
Totally. Yeah. And going back to non-hormonal methods in general, there's, as I mentioned, there's the barrier methods, there's the FAM method, but then there's also herbal contraception, and I'm not going to talk too much about it, but yeah, I think
Okay.
that it's important for us to recognize all the methods that women and people have been using to control their fertility throughout humanity and history. So
Right.
there are, herbal forms there's also herbal abortifacients, so, herbal abortions.
Right.
And there are forms of herbal contraception as well. So when it
Oh,
comes to FAM, yeah, I'm happy to talk about FAM because, yeah, I think there's a lot of different things that people can do to be, and I'm saying people to acknowledge that there are people with anatomy that identify as men who are menstruating and have
of course.
uteruses and all of that, men and also non-binary. So I'm just going to use people. But yeah, so for people to be aware of when they're fertile, I think is a really not only a way to control their fertility, but also potentially something that's empowering for them, to know what's going on in their body. So, this would include things like monitoring your cervical mucus. The most basic thing to do is, counting the days, right? So if you have a 30-day cycle, that second half of your cycle for all people is almost always 14 days. So what you're going to do is you're going to take that cycle length and subtract 14 days. So if you are a 30-day cycle person, you're almost always going to ovulate on day 16. Like that's going to be your fertile period. Let's say you have a much shorter cycle. You have a 25-day cycle, like you have those quick cycles. You're going to subtract those 14 days. That means that you're almost always going to ovulate on that 11th day. So keeping track
I
of
have
that.
Yeah, I have a question about that because I'm someone that for the most part, I would say give or take a couple days, maybe actually one day actually. I would say my cycle normally comes on at the same date, same time every month. However, say I travel or say I get back into exercising. Um, I have even recently more so been abnormal, where it's just like, damn, my period then came a whole week early. For women like that, you would you still recommend this method if essentially their cycles are not as consistent or normal, I would say, because that's always been my fear. I'm like, I could come a week early, a week late, 3 days early, a day late. Does that still work then if I'm abnormal in that way?
Yeah, so two things. I mean, I think that this method is best practice. Number one, if getting pregnant isn't going to ruin your life. And
Okay.
for real talk, yeah, and
Okay.
that's a factor again, coming back to this main idea that, like, it's different for everyone. Some people are like, if I got pregnant, it would ruin my life. Other people are like, you know what, it wouldn't be a big deal. I'm kind of open to it, or whatever. Like, everybody's different. But
Right.
I think this method is best practiced for people who it wouldn't ruin their life, people who are very on top of their shit, and for people who are able to combine different ways of using it. Like, if you have an irregular period, then what you should be doing is definitely tracking it, and so that you have an average cycle length. Like
Okay.
me, I have over 10 years of menstrual data. I think I told you this on the last episode. It was
Yes.
wild. So I
That
have
is
my average.
insane.
Yeah, and I know. And believe me, I have months where I'm 5 days early, 5 days late, whatever. But the average hasn't shifted much. It's like 32,
Okay.
33 days. So you do that, but
How
then
long?
also,
I mean, you have 10 years though. How long would you say it would take a woman to realistically find her average? How many months? Or would you
maybe a
say it would
year.
take a year?
A
Okay.
year, 2 years. I mean, there's no, real hard numbers on this, but I think that doing that, having this kind of idea of what the average is, but then also, again, paying attention to your cervical mucus, paying attention to other things about your body. You could even do the whole basal body temperature thing, get a basal body thermometer. But then also just like practicing, maybe you do use condoms for that 1 week you're unsure. Maybe you do pull out plus fam, those, that week or 2 weeks that you're
Yes.
unsure. So I think it's best used when you combine a different, different parts of this awareness plus potentially protection.
Okay. Okay. I'm not gonna lie. I'm now going to also do my research in the herbal options. I most recently had an episode. Shout out to Mila again. We had the conversation because she is an anti-vaxxer. So I thought it was a very important conversation to even bring up right now in terms of the COVID-19 vaccine being out. But also, my question was, okay, well, if you don't believe in vaccinations, have you done birth control? Have you taken monostat? Have you taken these other medicinal options that are out here? Because essentially those are being put in your body. And it brought me back to even you bringing up the depot. Now that I think about it, what is there a difference now that I think about it? Is there a difference essentially between a vaccination and what we're putting in our bodies for birth control? Is there any correlation to that, to where someone that may fear the vaccine, should they also look at the things that they're putting into their body in terms of birth control?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just start out. I'm no expert on vaccines,
Yes, it's
but
fine. Me neither. Me neither.
yeah, but no, I think this really comes back to, again, this principal question of, like, people should be empowered and informed to do, what they feel is right for them. And when it comes to birth control, there's some people that don't want to alter their hormonal profile at all. And
Right.
that you know, great. There's options for people who don't want to do that. There's some people who do want to, they're like, give me that, give me the pill patching, give me the whatever, because I want to have that, I appreciate the effects of those hormones on my body. So, everybody's just so different. And I think that
For
when
sure.
it comes down to it, I said this on the horrible decisions episode, and I'll say it again, but, for combined method, for example, pill patch ring, a lot of people, I think there's this misconception where people are like, I don't want to pump in extra hormones into my body. Well, actually what's happening is when you take a combined method, what it's doing is it's kind of putting your ovaries into like kind of I call it like like they're sitting in the recliner because they're not producing a fertile egg and releasing it.
Right.
They're relaxing. And, when your ovary is producing that fertile egg and releasing it, that's a lot of work. And that in itself pumps out a lot of hormones. So actually, naturally. When you are on a combined method, and again, I'm not a scientist in this, but oftentimes it's been shown that the hormonal profile of a person using one of those methods is actually lower. The overall baseline hormones is actually lower than a naturally cycling woman. So it's this misconception of like, I'm pumping my body up with hormones. It's like, calm down, everybody. Like, it could actually be less, you know?
So this wouldn't be a conversation if we didn't also, before we get out of here, discuss emergency contraception. So a lot of us, again, like myself, like many of my friends, may not want to go through putting something into our bodies, either long term or on a weekly or monthly basis. So if we slip up, we go into the emergency plan B, literally, as our option. And we were having this conversation right prior to coming on because we all say plan B, even if it's necessarily not the brand plan B. So now there are multiple options that someone can take for emergency contraception. Could you list maybe what ingredients should be in one, some of the ones that you're familiar with outside of plan B? And then also I did want to bring up one of the ones that I see is going viral recently, and we can talk about that as well. But what information do you have to share regarding emergency contraception?
Sure, yeah. I mean, emergency contraception is great.
It is, isn't it?
Great that it exists. Obviously, not ideal to be taking it all the time, but glad that it exists. So, emergency contraception, also called EC, is just usually a single or double dose of progestin, and
Okay.
the single dose is usually, I think it's 1.5 milligrams. So it usually is the same ingredient. It's called like levostranol, something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. There's a lot of
Levo.
brands out there. There's Next Choice. There's obviously Plan B. There's another one like Next Choice that's really common. That's a generic. There's also another one that's called Ella. Now, Ella is a different hormone completely, I believe. And this is a type of EC that can only be obtained through a healthcare provider. And it
Okay.
is for women who are over a certain BMI. So this is something where, a lot of people say, well, EC is not effective if you're over a certain BMI. Well,
Correct.
correct. And that's why it's a good idea to go to a healthcare provider and see if maybe this is a better option for you. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on EC. It's, it can be really effective. I think they recommend it, 72 hours within, but it could be also even effective within 5 days, I believe.
Up to 5 days. That's what I saw as well. So there's another one that I saw recently going viral on Twitter. I love getting all of my news and information on Twitter. Not sure how good that is. But it's one that is called My Way. I don't want to say that I am, saying it works or doesn't work, but it basically is available on Amazon for only $8. And as most of us know, even Plan B is about $50 at your local pharmacy. And actually, the funny thing about this and why it's going viral is there's all of these reviews of women actually posting their ultrasounds and saying that, oh, so this didn't work for me. It is a Plan B that's available on Amazon. And I did want to ask you, I know that we can go, again, to our local pharmacies and get Plan B now over the counter. When I was growing up, you used to actually have to go to you had to go to the pharmacist and show that you were over 18 and all of that to even get it. It's now available over the counter. Would you suggest this contraception being sold on Amazon or?
Hell no.
That's what I'm like.
Hell no.
It is like literally a tenth of the price of what we're used to. It does have the levonorgestrel title on there. However, yeah, I'm not sure if this is something that I would suggest anyone looking for emergency contraceptive as well to go on Amazon and get it. Also, you do have only that short window realistically. And so you want to get it as soon as possible, even if you're able to get this on Amazon Prime. I don't think I would suggest it either. Do you have any other ways that you've seen EC or birth control administered, or maybe, a way that women should look to it outside of maybe their primary care provider like a nonprofit, a Planned Parenthood? Is that something that you suggest people to go to? Or I mean, I've been to a free gyno here in New York. Those are options, and you would recommend those as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, like I think especially like for youth, like if you can't afford to buy it at a pharmacy, like there absolutely are options. I think that probably the best option in terms of, because I know your listeners are all over the place. If they're
Yes.
here in the States, what they can do is they can go to they can just type into Google Title 10 provider search. Title 10 provider. And that'll lead you to, I believe it's Office of Population. I don't remember what it is, but it's a federal
Okay.
website. And you could just put in your zip code and it'll come out with all of the Title 10 providers in your area. You can also, it's important to know that Planned Parenthood is no longer included in that because of that whole
Okay.
thing
Because of
of,
the funding.
yeah.
Yep.
So you can also go to a Planned Parenthood for sure.
Okay.
And in those cases, most Title 10 providers are going to either be, maybe they take your insurance, but a lot of them, if they're community clinics, they'll be either sliding scale or oftentimes like for youth, there'll be some kind of program that they can, be seen with and that will provide the funding. Again, this is going to really vary by where you live, but I
By
think
where
that
you
that's
live.
probably the best option for folks to check
Of
out.
course. Something that I like to always do before we get off with our guests is have our guests leave some sort of tip or bit of advice for any of our listeners who tuned in specifically for this topic. I guess what would be your advice to anyone going through the same rabbit hole that I went through not too long ago with searching for birth control options? What would be your advice to that person that doesn't really know what is the best option for them?
Totally. So I think three things quickly. Number one, again, like you asked, you kind of have to try it to see what works for you, unfortunately. Number two, the best birth control method for you is the one that you'll actually use. And then number three, I just want to encourage people to be really like to be empowered and to, have honest conversations with themselves and with their partners because, their life is all about trade-offs, right?
Yeah.
And, you can have a birth control method that is really effective, that, you like overall, but then maybe it makes you feel really bad. And it's like, I want folks to be empowered in their sexuality, enjoy their bodies. And so just encourage folks to have honest conversations with themselves about what's most important to them in their sexual health and in these choices.
And I love that you say that because mine for sure was being myself and controlling everything about me that I could, including my skin, my weight, my
Sure.
attitude, my emotions. And that
Sure.
was actually the real conversation that I had with my partner. I said, "Listen, I really, really like you. I love our sex, and I'm not sure what type of family planning you have in mind, but I don't want to change who I am to be with you. And I also want you to be very clear that I'm not interested in building a family or having a child." And it was a very real conversation to have that we had very early on. And I think that amidst me being someone that does, uh, you know, push women to be their best sexually liberated selves and not limit even the amount of partners they have or anything, because you should be able to be free to do exactly what you want. I think it is very important, like you said, whether you have one partner or 10, that conversation needs to be had with all of them, whether you're using protection or not, because of course, slip ups can always happen. Condoms break. They're not also, nothing is 100% effective. And so, whether you're using some sort of barrier or birth control, I think anybody that you lay in bed with, those type of conversations need to be had with your partners. And you also want to get a feel of, their thoughts on it as well. But Esme, where can any of my listeners reach out to you if they have any further questions or just want to connect with you on a deeper level, maybe have some questions for you or bring you onto their show? Where can they find you?
Sure, yeah. I think the best place is probably Twitter. My handle is eSnow with three W's at the end of snow.
And guys, we are going to make sure that that information is in the description of this episode. Stay tuned for a little bit of stats and facts on birth control, and we will be right back. Esme, thank you so very much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Mandy.
Bye.